As Nigeria has the most dynamic private sector on the African continent, the words of the new World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Dr. Ndiame Diop, on the sidelines of the World Bank and IMF meetings in Washington, D.C. He had an extensive conversation on the Nigerian economy with Arise News business correspondent Rotus Odiri. Take a look.
Dr. Ndiame Diop, the country director for Nigeria from the World Bank. Thank you so much for speaking to Arise News. It's good to see you here at the IMF World Bank annual meetings in D.C.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Nigeria on Wednesday hosted a number of foreign investors talking about reforms and so on and so forth. From your perspective, you've engaged with investors in the private sector for all through your career. What do you think they want to see and hear from Nigeria?
Yeah. Now, first of all, I think this engagement that you mentioned is exactly the right thing to do. Communicating the reforms, the significance of the reforms, the early and expected impact, and stressing the fact that there is no going back to unsustainable policy, I think is really the right thing to do. So I'm very glad that the Nigerian Governor of Central Bank and Minister of Finance have had the chance to do it here in Washington. From my perspective, these reforms really do three good things for the Nigerian economy. Number one, they have avoided, or they helped avoid, a deep fiscal crisis. Just to illustrate, in 2022, the share of debt service on total net revenues was about 100%. So this is not sustainable. The second thing it does is that it really helps stabilize the economy, reduce macroeconomic risk, and then really improve the policy framework, which is really important for investment, private investment in particular, in growth. And then the third thing is really providing the fiscal space for the government to be finally able to spend on the health, the education, the social protection of Nigerians, but also on critical infrastructure, all of which are really important. Now, all of that said, we should recognize that these reforms or these benefits have come with quite high social cost. Inflation is high, and many Nigerians are really feeling the pinch. It is urgent to support them, to support all the people that are really struggling with high inflation. It is imperative to scale up the cash transfer program, which actually I'm very familiar with because the World Bank is financing and supporting technically. Nigeria has chosen to go with a sort of what we call golden standard in terms of cash transfer, which basically means that you use the social registry, which actually we helped to put together in Nigeria. It's a 19 million household registry. That's about 60 to 70 million Nigerians, bottom up. But what the government has decided to do after January is to really make sure that everyone who gets the cash transfer is biometrically identified and the transfer is done digitally. All of that is for the integrity of the system, and it's very, very good. But unfortunately, it slows down a little bit the process because you have to go back to the registry and make sure that these potential beneficiaries have the national identification number, but also the bank verification number. And so it's been quite a process logistically, but the bank has been really helping. And in recent weeks, some breakthrough have been found to really accelerate the registration of these households. And so far, I think 4.5 million households have benefited, but we really need to ramp that up very, very quickly to reach 15 million, which is the target for the government.
Thank you for that.
And the second,
yes,
if I just may say,
please.
The second thing that is really critical in my view is to ensure that the savings from these reforms are spent on those things that I mentioned, like education, health, critical infrastructure, social protection, so that the Nigerian feel the benefits of these reforms. And I think this is really, really critical going forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the in-depth solutions there. I wanted to talk to you about electricity. In Nigeria right now, the Energy Commission, Director General and CEO of the Energy Commission, is looking at domesticating the manufacturing of solar panels in order to be able to get more people electricity. Do you think that's a realistic initiative?
Well, first of all, electricity supply is a big constraint right now for human capital in Nigeria. And we know that without improving the sort of reliability and supply of electricity, the economy will really not be able to grow at its potential. And then at the micro level, the firms will struggle to increase their productivity, to expand, and the smaller ones will see all their sort of margins eaten by cost of electricity or high cost of electricity. So it's absolutely critical. Now, I think the solution is a mix of perhaps three things. One is grid electricity. And Nigeria cannot industrialize without that. So it is absolutely critical to do those reforms that are relatively well known. And the World Bank has programs supporting the reforms in the power sector. You really have to fix the discos. You have to make sure that the discos are economically viable and are able to pay their bills. You have to really make sure that they invest in metering. They have the meters to be able to identify consumers and to really collect enough to be able to pay their bills. You need to ensure that they can invest in the distribution infrastructure so that they can increase the reliability of electricity supply. But it's not just the discos. You also have to invest in transmission. You have to invest also in generation. So all of that is really critical, and that's the first bucket. Second bucket is, by the time the transmission lines get to some rural areas and peri-urban areas, it may take a long time. So those people shouldn't wait. We should provide them with off-grid electricity or mini-grid electricity, right? And this is actually a positive story. There's a lot of developers throughout Nigeria that are investing in these areas. However, because of the cost of delivering electricity in this remote area, you need to really incentivize those developers. And the World Bank actually is working with government on a very ambitious project whereby the bank incentivizes developers. They get a sort of catalytic grant that will actually basically make the decision. Without that, they wouldn't really invest. And the target is 17.5 million household connected, and firms, small firms, connected through that means. So it's a very exciting story, and I think it's something that is happening quite fast right now in Nigeria. It's part of the solution. And then the last bit is to really leverage beyond solar all the natural resources that Nigeria has to really increase supply through renewable energy, right? The project that I just mentioned is actually solar. It's a solar system. But beyond solar, you also have, small hydro, etc., which Nigeria can mobilize. Now, I think the fact that Nigeria has the ambition to increase the renewable part in the energy mix provides the opportunity for manufacturers to invest in Nigeria. Nigeria has two advantages. One is the critical mineral or the inputs going into the production of solar exist in Nigeria. So by optimizing policy, Nigeria can attract investment in that sector. But it will have to do really the hard work of, identifying all the barriers, preventing the scale-up of investment in this area and addressing them. One of them perhaps is for domestic investors, power, and then the other one is perhaps high cost of capital. I think some of the we heard in the news some new investment actually happening in Nasarawa, etc. Those are really very encouraging, but it will require really some hard work, some reforms to really be able to, for Nigeria to scale up that. But I think it's possible.
Fantastic. Look, the World Bank has been incredibly helpful in these initiatives. I want to ask you about jobs, youth jobs. It's been a subject that's been discussed here at the annual meetings. What, I guess, needs to happen to be able to scale employment, and not just employment. I really want to ask you more about the transition from menial, low-paying jobs to high-paying, productive jobs.
So look, I'm very obsessed about this because I think that for African countries, not just Nigeria, this is such a critical area where government have to really make every effort to really accelerate the pace of job creation. And it's important to go back to why we are here. We're not creating enough jobs for the youth, partly because the economy is not transforming and growing fast enough, right? And it's really interesting to look at the data. In Africa in general, firms that are born small or micro, if you look at their life cycle, you come back 10 years later or even 5 years later, they remain small. They don't grow fast. They don't grow enough to really increase the scope of job creation. That's really a big issue. And the second element, and we can discuss why is that, right? I think it has to do with factors that are internal to the firms, basically perhaps the characteristic of those that create those firms, and the extent to which they have competent workers, et cetera, the extent to which they can access capital, and so on and so forth. And there are factors that are outside the firms, which is basically the business environment. You will not grow as a firm if, access to electricity is a problem, right? Or if, access to capital is a problem. So, all those, or if infrastructure is not there. So it is really important to fix that. But beyond helping small firms or micro firms to grow so that they can create more jobs, you also need to really create the condition for medium and large firms to enter the market, because global evidence shows that, job acceleration is really a function or a byproduct of economic transformation. And you get economic transformation faster by getting large firms that are, that have large scale of production, large scale of investment, big scope of job creation, and, also perhaps some of them export oriented. That's where you really create massive jobs. And this is how East Asian countries have done it. They have created massive jobs by really economically transforming their economy. Now, there's a supply side of the story, right? Which is really investing in the supply of skills. And actually, you really have to start with the foundation. You have to start even before the kids go to school. The rate of stunting in Nigeria is just too high for the country. I think, over 11 million children under 5 are stunted. That's 35% of that cohort. You have to eliminate that. You have to make sure that there's no more stunting, so that when they get to school at the primary level, they're very well prepared to learn, right? And then at the basic education level, you really need to improve the quality of education. First of all, you need, in the case of Nigeria, there are many areas where actually the first order of business is to just get them to school, because those out-of-school children is very large in Nigeria, between 15, 17 million. Get all those kids to school and improve the quality of their learning so that their sort of learning outcomes will be there. That will prepare them for the labor market. And then there are issues related to transition. How do you match skills with the needs of firms? There's one thing that I learned recently, which actually is a really gold mine for Nigeria, and this is this NYCS or NYSC. NYSC. Yeah. This is amazing. To me, if you leverage that and then help that institution to really provide the right skills to these 300,000 per year or 400,000 per year that are, this will be super helpful. And in fact, the World Bank is looking into that to really try and help on that. All these areas that I mentioned are areas where we have project, we have operation, and we are helping also reform. It's not just about financing this project, but it is about helping institutionalize things such that there is sustainability. Right. At the end of the project, Nigeria will be able to continue to do those investments. At the state level, at the federal level, we have one project that is really focused on keeping girls at school, but also training them in ICT, training them in digital skills, and then helping also to really help them to access STEM fields, because the number of girls or the enrollment of girls in STEM fields is quite low compared to men. Right. It's about 13% for engineering programs, for polytechnics 20%, and for TVET programs 13%. That's very low, and we need to really, I think, address the stereotypes that are sort of pushing young girls to, I don't know, education and arts and all of that. All of that is very good, but we also need women in those areas, because that's also what will drive technology and transformation in the future.
What's your outlook for Nigeria? We're almost about the tail end of 2024 going into 2025. How do you see things playing out with the reforms and everything else?
Look, I'm very optimistic and excited about what I've been seeing in Nigeria. I've been in Nigeria over the last four months, and even before transitioning, I was looking at what the government was trying to do, those signature reforms that we have discussed earlier. I think these are steering the economy to the right direction. It will provide macro stability, and macro stability is a precondition for investment and growth. And I feel that, if you add to that the structural reforms that are needed, because there's no free lunch. Nigeria cannot really just, grow fast without doing the hard work. So we'll have to fix power, fix trade, which is really important, because with all these trade bottlenecks that firms are really facing in Nigeria, but also fixing security so that mobility of goods within Nigeria will be much easier. This country has the scale and potential for economies of scale that is unique in Africa. The country has a private sector that is the most vibrant, the most dynamic in Africa. All the ingredients are there, and Nigerians are extremely entrepreneurial. So we just need good public policy to support them. And we need a very good partnership between public sector and private sector, a sort of productive alliance for growth and jobs. And that is something that requires being very pragmatic, looking at the different sectors where there is potential for growth, whether it's agriculture, manufacturing, and services, and then identifying the obstacles to investment and growth, and then concretely addressing them, with the government doing its part and the private sector doing its part.
Dr. Ndiame Diop, World Bank Country Director for Nigeria. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for talking to Arise News.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.